What's going on, everybody? B-Scott here with you. It's the first 4 downs, and on today's show, we got your running back sit starts ahead of the Week 1 NFL season. These are all your running backs in every single matchup. My opinions on the sits and starts of each individual game. So keep it locked and loaded right here at the first 4 downs. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. As I mentioned in the preview, we got the running back sit starts. These are all the matchup sit starts for your running back position. So before we get to today's content, don't forget, like the video, subscribe, share a thumbnail, all that good stuff. Comment, drop a comment on a running back. If there's someone I didn't mention or I missed, drop a comment, let me know. I'll give you my opinion on them. Also, thanks to all the subscribers, all the love. We're ready for the fantasy season. It's Week 1, so let's dive right into it. Let's start with the first matchup. It's going to be Jacksonville on the road against Houston Texans. So first off, James Robinson, in my opinion, a top 10 running back play this week. I think Houston Texans gave up the most rushing yards last season. They didn't really improve overall as a team. I think they're going to be the worst team in the league anyway. So James Robinson, huge spot here to have a big week. No Travis Etienne. Obviously, Carlos Hyde's going to be in there to back him up on a few downs, give him some snaps. But I think James Robinson's due for a huge workload here. We know he can make work in the pass game. I have no problems. I think it's a great spot for Trevor Lawrence to be eased into the offense and eased into the NFL season. So I like the Jacksonville Jaguars here, and I love James Robinson. Huge start for me. Probably a top 10 running back. On the flip side, the running backs on the Houston Texans. I don't know who's going to be the starter. And really, who knows who's going to get the bulk of the carries. At this point, it's a four-headed monster, and no one really knows. Lots of question marks around it. For me, it's a great spot for the running backs, but I don't know who's going to get enough love to be able to start one of these guys. So I'm going to stray away from them. I'm going to have to wait a week to see. I know it's a good week to be starting a running back in Houston. Jacksonville, their defense wasn't that great anyway last year either. So this is a good spot for the Houston running backs, but I can't trust any of them here this week. Now let's move on to the Los Angeles Chargers on the road against the Washington football team. Austin Eckler, hamstring injury. That's the claim. He was limited in practice today, Friday, and I don't really know how much. They're saying he's going to be ready to play. I'm not so sure if I even can trust him in my lineups, to be honest. Playing a Washington football team that's great on defense. Allowed only 4.2 yards per carry last season. Also, give up the 4th fewest receptions and receiving yards to running backs, where Austin Eckler makes his money. I just don't know. I get it. You drafted Austin Eckler in the first or second round of your drafts. You got to start him. But this is a tough spot for me. If I had a third great running back, if I went 3 running backs, I would possibly think about benching Austin Eckler this week, to be fair, to be honest. But I get it if you're starting him. It makes sense. He's an elite type of player, but it's still a very tough matchup right here for the Los Angeles Chargers. So for me, Eckler, I'm on the fence with. On the flip side of things, Antonio Gibson, obviously a starter. You draft him in the first, second round, you're going to be starting him on a weekly basis. Now, Los Angeles Chargers, yes, they got a lot of healthy veterans back on defense. They should be better than they were last season, but still give up the 5th most receptions to running backs, 91 receptions on the year. And I think Antonio Gibson is just due for a big week to come out and start. They're going to be running the ball heavy. The preseason, it's shown that they're obviously trusting him in the pass game. I like Antonio Gibson here. He's obviously a must-start for many of you every single week. So Austin Eckler, Antonio Gibson, these are 2 running backs that I would be focusing on starting this week. Outside of that, you're not looking to start any other running backs. Now on to the Seattle Seahawks on the road against the Indianapolis Colts. Running backs, Chris Carson. He's a must-start for me in a spot where it's not a great matchup, to be honest. Indy gave up the 3rd fewest rushing yards on the season last year, and coming in, their defense actually improved a little bit. So I'd be weary here with Chris Carson, but I think the reception work, you saw it last year. It really upticked for Chris Carson. The Indianapolis Colts gave up the 4th most receptions to running backs last season. I think Carson still has an option to find the end zone here. Probably 3 or 4 receptions, probably 80 total yards, possibly to 100 total yards. So obviously you're starting Chris Carson. On the other side, Jonathan Taylor. You draft him in the 1st or 2nd round. You're going to be starting Jonathan Taylor here. Seattle Seahawks were actually pretty decent against the running backs last year, and that defense, once again, improved a little bit. They're fully healthy. Jamal Adams, Carlos Dunlap, these are defensive players that really helped them down the stretch last season, and I think Jonathan Taylor is obviously going to see a big workload here. So yes, you're starting Jonathan Taylor, but honestly, Nyheim Hines, he could possibly see some run here just in the case that Seattle comes up and gets out ahead early. You could see Nyheim Hines in 3rd downs or in comeback mode. So Nyheim Hines, possible flex option, but possibly staying away. Obviously, you're starting Jonathan Taylor and you're starting Chris Carson. The New York Jets on the road against Carolina Panthers. I'm not starting a Jet running back. I just can't this week. Obviously, Tevin Coleman's going to be somewhat of the starter, but it's going to be a rotation. It's going to be a committee. Against Carolina Panthers defense, that's improving and getting better. Now, yes, Carolina's been known in the past to have a terrible run defense, but last season, actually middle of the pack. They're starting to improve that defense, only getting better on the outside. It's going to be rough, and I don't like any of these Jets running backs in this matchup. On the other side, Carolina Panthers, you're starting CMC. You draft him 1 overall. You're never sitting Christian McCaffrey. Fire him up. He's the RB1. Plain and simple. The Minnesota Vikings, on the road against Cincinnati Bengals. You're starting Dalvin Cook. Once again, he was the number 2 or 3 pick, wherever you got him in your league. You're not sitting him. In a matchup against Cincinnati Bengals that doesn't have a great defense, middle of the pack. So you're starting Dalvin Cook. It's obvious. On the flip side, Joe Mixon. Minnesota's defense was really banged up and hurt last season and was, once again, not very good. Gave up 4.6 yards per carry, the 3rd most rushing touchdowns, and the 5th most fantasy points overall to running backs. So Mixon, for me, absolute start here. You know the volume's going to be here. Since Gio Bernard left the building, there's high hopes that Joe Mixon's going to see a true 3-down back roll. And guess what? You're going to be starting him here in a matchup that could get out of hand with some fantasy points. The Arizona Cardinals, on the road against Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry, you're going to start him. Plain and simple. Arizona, actually, their defense is even much improved on last season. Added a few players in free agency. They're going to be pretty good, but you're not sitting Derrick Henry. You drafted him, you're not sitting him. It doesn't matter. On the other side of the ball, Arizona, James Conner, Chase Edmonds. I don't know if I can start both these guys. I'll tell you right now that this has shootout potential all over it. Both these teams can put up a lot of points. And Tennessee Titans, their defense, bottom 5 last year in a lot of categories. So I like James Conner to possibly find the end zone here. In the red zone, I really feel like he's going to get more work than Chase Edmonds. And I think Chase Edmonds is going to do enough in the pass game, if you play in a PPR league especially, that you're going to be starting him. So both of these running backs, viable RB2 options, possibly even flex options in a game that could get out of hand with scoring. So I like all 3 of these running backs in this matchup. San Francisco, on the road against the Detroit Lions. Raheem Mostert. This is a smash spot for me. This is, in my opinion, once again, like James Robinson, a chance to finish inside the top 10 this week at the running back position. Coming into the season fresh, you saw what he did in the 3rd preseason game. I get it, they draft Trey Sermon. I think that's because of the injury history with the running backs they had. And Trey Sermon, obviously, can fit in that role as the backup guy. And this week, Trey Sermon even could possibly be a flex option, considering as long as he sees enough snaps. I think the Niners are going to destroy the Detroit Lions, plain and simple. That defense is absolutely horrible. The Niners defense should be coming in somewhat healthy. This is going to be a very lopsided game, and I love Raheem Mostert in this spot. Trey Sermon, I'm not so sure if you're necessarily starting him, but if you're in a deeper league and he's your RB2, I understand. There should be a lot of run here for both running backs. On the other side, Detroit Lions, DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams. It's the Niners defense. I can't trust any of these running backs, considering last season, 49ers still put up a top 5 run defense with all the decimated injuries and allowed only 4 yards per carry to running backs. So I'm going to stay away from both these running backs. I get it, DeAndre Swift. They're saying he's going to be ready to go. This is going to look like a committee this week, and I think it's going to be a lopsided game. Of course, the reception work could be there. If you drafted DeAndre Swift as your RB2 and you got to start him, I understand. But for me, I'm kind of trying to stray away because I think outside of the reception work that you hope DeAndre Swift can get, they're going to struggle running the football. So I'm out on these Detroit running backs altogether. Now on to the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road against the Buffalo Bills. In this matchup, I like Najee Harris. Obviously, Buffalo Bills, middle of the pack, run defense. And I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game. Najee Harris is expected to be a true 3-down back, going to see all the reception work. You hope to see 80+% snap share here from Najee Harris, and you drafted him at a spot that you're obviously starting him as your RB1, possibly maybe your RB2, but I think just the volume alone allows him to be a start here. On the other side of the ball, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary. I'm not starting any of these guys. Pittsburgh Steelers were outrageously good against the running backs. Bottom 3 in all categories. I'm just staying away from these running backs. Maybe Zach Moss falls into the end zone. I get it, but you're not starting these guys, not this week against the stout Pittsburgh defense. So give me Najee Harris, sit the Buffalo running backs. Let's move on. Philadelphia Eagles on the road against the Atlanta Falcons. Now this game, I think is going to have a lot of points scored. Once again, I think both these defenses are not very good. These offenses are going to be able to put up some fantasy points. The running backs, I'm not so sure how they're going to fare in this game. Mike Davis. Obviously, Philadelphia is giving up 12 fewest fantasy points last season to running backs, 7th fewest receiving yards to running backs. So I don't know if this is a great spot for Mike Davis, but if you draft him as your RB2, you're possibly starting him here. I think there's going to be a lot of fantasy points to be had. I like Mike Davis as a start in this. He's obviously right now number 1 on the depth chart, should see a heavy workload. Hopefully he can get you 10 to 12 fantasy points here, especially with the receiving work. Miles Sanders. This is a tough matchup. The Atlanta Falcons, surprisingly, put up a top 5 run defense last season. So for me, Miles Sanders, you obviously got to start him. I think he's the type of running back that could literally take it to the house on any given play. So yes, I'd be starting Miles Sanders in this matchup. I just think there's going to be a lot of fantasy points to be had. Atlanta Falcons, we're good, like I said, against the run. So it could be a tough spot here for Miles Sanders, but both these guys I'm firing up as starts. I can't trust anybody else in these backfields until I see otherwise. Cleveland Browns, on the road against Kansas City Chiefs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's a tough spot for him. 4.3 yards per carry, that's what they gave up, Cleveland did last season. And they got even better on defense. So this could be a tough spot for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to see some run. Obviously, you hope for the big reception numbers, but you know Patrick Mahomes, he likes to air it out down the field. So we'll have to wait and see how that materializes with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But this week, it is kind of a tough matchup. I don't know if he finds the end zone. Probably 80, hopefully 90 total yards here. If you draft him high as your RB2, you're probably going to be starting him, rolling him out anyway. If you have some other better options, I would possibly go there. I think this is going to be a tough spot for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Not necessarily a sit for me, but just giving you a heads up that it could be a tough day. On the flip side, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Kansas City Chiefs gave up the fewest rushing touchdowns last season. 7 rushing touchdowns to running backs. But they did allow over 100 yards per game on the ground to running backs. So I still like Nick Chubb in this matchup. And then Kareem Hunt in a little bit of a revenge game here, going against his former team, Kansas City Chiefs, giving up 3rd most receptions and the most receiving yards to running backs. So obviously I like Kareem Hunt in this matchup. Great spot for him. Nick Chubb could still see 100 yards, possibly a touchdown. I like both these running backs in what could be a high-scoring game once again. If it turns out into a shootout, there's Baker Mayfield and other players that I like, but I do like both these running backs. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it could be tough. Green Bay Packers on the road against the New Orleans Saints. Now, Green Bay Packers, Aaron Jones is a great running back. You drafted him as a top 6, 7 option. I really think he could possibly be the RB1 this season. He does have a tough sled of schedule this week against the New Orleans Saints, who were a top 5 defense last year. Don't get me wrong. It's a tough matchup, but I think the volume's going to be there. I think Green Bay actually wins this game pretty handedly. I like Aaron Jones. You're going to be starting him anyway. And on the flip side, Alvin Kamara. You know what you're getting with Alvin Kamara. You draft him as a top 5 pick. You're going to be starting him no matter what. So obviously start Alvin Kamara, start Aaron Jones, and we'll have to wait and see, luckily, what A.J. Dillon's role is going to be in the regular season. Denver Broncos on the road against the New York Giants. Melvin Gordon. This is a tough spot to be starting Melvin Gordon. Who knows what it's going to shake out with Javonte Williams. Obviously, I like Melvin Gordon just ahead of Javonte Williams this week, just until we wait and see if Javonte Williams can really supplant Melvin Gordon at the RB1 spot. I think they're going to split pretty heavily anyway. And the New York Giants give up 4.1 yards per carry on the season last year. Very underrated defense, but they did give up the 4th most receptions and receiving yards to running backs. So Melvin Gordon in a tough spot here. I think he can do enough in the pass game to be able to have a viable fantasy day. Javonte Williams, I got him on the sits this week. I just don't know how much he'll be able to do. And like I said, the reception game is what hurts the Giants the most. At least it did last season. So I like Melvin Gordon in the pass game a little bit more than Javonte Williams. We'll have to wait and see how that really plays out. And then Saquon Barkley, New York Giants. It's not that bad of a spot. Denver Broncos gave up 4.8 yards per carry last season and also gave up, on average, 100 yards a game to the running back position. So I don't know with Saquon Barkley what his workload's going to be. That's the biggest question mark. So it's one of those things like obviously you draft him as your RB1. You're probably going to be starting him. If you have other options, I would probably stray away this week from Saquon Barkley just because you don't know what the workload's going to be. Is it going to be 8 to 10 carries? Is it going to be 15 touches? Could he get to that 20 touch mark? Possibly. You don't know. So with all the question marks around it, he's a guy that could literally win or lose your week. So it's a tough spot here, albeit Denver. I think their defense. I think their defense absolutely improved this offseason. So it is going to be a tough spot. I'm going to stray away from Saquon Barkley personally just because it's a lot of risk. Now, obviously, if you have some safer plays, you're already ahead because of Thursday Night Football. Maybe you take a chance with Saquon Barkley as your RB1. But if you got other options, maybe you look elsewhere just this week. Miami Dolphins on the road against the New England Patriots. Let's start with Myles Gaskin. New England Patriots giving up 110 yards per game to the running backs last season. I like Myles Gaskin in the spot. He obviously had a lot of buzz around him this offseason, this preseason. Is he going to be the starter? Is he going to be the headlining running back? Obviously, he's shown that his talent has supplanted the other guys. That's what it looks like to me. And he's going to be the most heavily used in that offense, in my opinion. So Myles Gaskin this week, albeit the Patriots, their defense did improve. We'll have to wait and see how much they improved. But I still like Gaskin here just because the pass work, just the receptions alone. He's a safe floor RB2 in my opinion. So that's why I like Myles Gaskin as a start this week. It may not be great, but I think he'll do okay. Damian Harris on the other side, I'm on the fence with. Miami did not allow a 100-yard rusher last season. They did allow 10 rushing scores inside the 5-yard line last season. Both of Damian Harris's rushing touchdowns were outside of the 5-yard line. Obviously, no Cam Newton. This bodes well for Damian Harris. Maybe he finds the end zone here. I don't really know if he can get to 100 yards in this matchup. I think you're looking at 60, 70 yards, and you're hoping for a touchdown to save his fantasy day. You know the reception work's not there. He had 5 receptions in 10 games last season. I mean, maybe he gets a little bump. We'll have to wait and see. I got Damian Harris in one of my leagues, my RB2. I got to roll him out there, but I think it's a touchdown, boom or bust this week. Chicago Bears on the road against the Los Angeles Rams. David Montgomery. This is an absolute tough spot for David Montgomery. 3.8 yards per carry. That's what the Rams gave up last season to running backs. That's ridiculous. Gave up third fewest fantasy points, the 6th fewest rushing yards, just 8 rushing touchdowns on the season. This is not a good spot for David Montgomery. Last season, we saw the pass game work is really what saved a lot of his fantasy production. And down the stretch, yes, he played outstanding. There's no question about it. But coming to this season, in one of the toughest spots with Andy Dalton under center, I'm not so sure David Montgomery's going to have a good day here. Obviously, they're bringing Damian Williams in the offseason. Tariq Cohen's not going to be ready. Damian Williams is a viable pass catcher and is a guy that could spell David Montgomery at times. We'll just have to wait and see how that kind of shakes out. If you drafted David Montgomery as RB2, obviously you might have to be rolling him out here, but it's going to be tough. He's a possible sit for me if you got better options. But if you don't, I understand you got to roll him out there. It's just going to be a hard day. Darrell Henderson. If you got him as your RB2, you possibly got to be starting him here. Chicago Bears gave up 4.1 yards per carry last season, gave up 0 receiving touchdowns to running backs. So obviously through the air, they're pretty tight. But Darrell Henderson, if he gets enough volume, he could see 80 yards here and a possible rushing touchdown. So I like Darrell Henderson in a tough matchup. You could see the Los Angeles Rams get out to a big lead here and run the ball to put it away. You know they like to run the football heavy. Sony Michel, he's barely been in the system more than a couple weeks now. I like Darrell Henderson in this matchup. Should be a pretty decent day for him. Finally, we got the Baltimore Ravens on the road against the Las Vegas Raiders. Gus Edwards out for the season. Dobbins out for the season. Justice Hill out for the season. I mean, it's terrible for the Baltimore Ravens. They got Le'Veon Bell, Devontae Freeman on the practice squad. Signed Latavius Murray. I do like Latavius Murray here in a few weeks. I think he's got to get acclimated, but I like him later on ahead of Tyson Williams in my opinion. But this week, Tyson Williams is the guy you're going to have. You're going to be starting him against the Las Vegas Raiders defense that was bottom 5 last year in most categories, especially against the run. So I like Tyson Williams in this matchup. I think Lamar Jackson's going to have to do a whole hell of a lot, and I think Baltimore wins the game ultimately, but Tyson Williams is definitely a start for me. On the flip side, Josh Jacobs. This is a tough spot. Baltimore Ravens gave up just 7 rushing touchdowns, fewest in the league last season. They did happen to give up 5 touchdowns through the air to running backs, so that's good for pass catching backs. But Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, who knows how this is going to shake out. If you drafted Josh Jacobs, your RB2, yes, you're probably going to roll him out there. It is a tough start, and he's going to have to find the end zone to get that value. I think he's going to struggle running between the tackles. If he can get some reception work, we'll have to wait and see. Kenyon Drake, is he going to take over that passing down role? You know Jalen Richard, he's a little banged up, so it's just a tough spot for me this week for Josh Jacobs. If you got other options, I suggest going elsewhere. So that's it. All your running back matchups, all your sit starts for every running back in every matchup. So, once again, if you like the video, don't forget, subscribe, share, thumb bell, all that good stuff. Comment, drop a comment, let me know how I'm doing. You got questions, just feel free to ask. I'll give you my opinion. So, once again, for the first 4 downs, it's been B. Scott, and I'm out.